Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 238 with repeat guest, Dr. Megan Tranter. Megan was also on episode 206, and what we're going to focus on today are just a lot of the skills out there, career things that we can do to kind of be ready for the future. So we're not going to talk about the different politics, but we are at a spot where we're seeing a lot of safety folks really kind of question the future. They're looking for new jobs. Some of them are being forced into looking for new jobs, whereas others are really kind of sitting down and questioning really what they've been doing all these years. So Megan is a expert at coaching and helping out, and really, I think when I think about it in life, we all need a coach, regardless of where we are in life, because a coach is going to be that outside person. It's really hard to read the label on the pickle jar when you're inside the pickle jar, but that outside person can really sit down and they're not emotionally invested the same way that we are with things. So, um, Megan, just real fast, the only thing that I really know about these times in life are, of course, I work on my resume and that kind of stuff. I think about my interviewing skills. I definitely know that I'm rusty out there. So I try to ask folks to ask me a couple of questions every so often. But what I really wanted to talk about was the mission. I guess people are asking me, and so I'm sure they're really asking you, of course, a lot about the mission moving forward.
Yeah, it's a really good question, David. And I'm actually glad that we're having this conversation today because we are seeing a lot of people who are at stages of their careers where, things are changing. And maybe it's choices that we're making ourselves, and maybe it's circumstances where we feel less control over what's happening. But nevertheless, it's always a good idea to be thinking through, what do I want from this career? What type of role would I like? What brings joy to me? What makes every day working in this role the type of thing that makes me want to get out of bed and, do the hard stuff? Because in health and safety, the work is not always easy. And I say this a lot, that it's a noble profession, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And so I think the first thing that all of us can think about, and again, no matter what situation each of us are in, is what is it about the profession of safety that we love? And then also, when you think about the different elements or the different types of jobs that you can get, whether it's a consultant, working for government, working for a publicly listed company, working for an NGO, what type of place would you like to work for? And then what type of role would you like to have? And so when I'm talking to people, that's often the first question that I'm asking them. And it's actually a really difficult one because you think to yourself, well, okay, I've done this in the past. Maybe I should continue to do this in the future. But that doesn't necessarily have to be right or not. So I think the first thing that we do when we're in this moment is we pause and we ask ourselves those questions. And, depending on our circumstances, maybe we need to go and take a job to get the paycheck. But if we do have that luxury of being able to take that moment to pause and think, then actually it's often much better in the long term because you also realize, well, maybe that role I had before or that type of company that I was working for before, maybe that wasn't the best fit for me. So that's probably the first thing that I'd suggest that you do.
Yeah, I think it's really hard that when something is sprung on you to
Yeah.
kind of say, okay, now I'm ready to, with a open mind, kind of think about the future. So it's always better when you have a job to kind of think about the job that you would like to have. And that also doesn't mean that you can't morph the job a little bit that you have too. So all of us were bringing in our own experiences. And most of the time, as safety professionals, we're kind of on our own too, which also means that we can kind of morph the role as we see fit too. So I think that really helps, and that's really good. But every so often, I do find a person who really suffers from the mission because they know they're doing well, but like all things, well, how do you really sit down and measure you're doing well when nobody's getting hurt. So it isn't like you could say, oh, there was all these injuries and death before and now everything's rosy. So it's always hard, I think, for safety professionals to really think about the role that they play in people's lives.
Mm. And then also when, David, when you link it back to career, there's so many different things that you can do in safety. So let's
Mhm.
say you really enjoy being out on the floor, and let's say you're a safety specialist type of role, and you're doing inspections, or maybe you're giving training or giving some input for some things. Maybe you're helping with risk assessments. That's a type of role that you may really enjoy. But then maybe you're thinking to yourself, I actually would love to be the facility person. Or maybe I would love to be a regional person and have multiple sites or locations. Or even if you work for a bigger company, you could be a country level person. There's all these different levels, right, that you could
Mhm.
do as well.
Mhm.
So I think this is the part for people to think through is what what do they want to do? Do they want to be on the floor? Do they want to be teaching people? Do they want to be in the boardroom? And I've talked to a few people lately actually about their careers where they have an aspiration of being the number one safety person. But then the question becomes is how do you get there? And like what is the path that you chart to get there? And I don't think that there's one single path, to get to
Mhm.
that type of role. But certainly there are certain skills and experiences that you want to have that you could list out and then work out how to get those experiences and skills to get you to that place. So,
Mhm.
for example, let's say someone does want to be a multi-site health and safety person. There's a level of coordination and collaboration and influence and strategic planning that's needed with those type of roles. You'll be doing less of the actual walking around the workplace and actually more working out how to lead a high performing team, having people follow the goals that they agree that you set together and with the business, and then actually bringing people along with you, both other safety people as well as people within the business, of the ultimate mission or vision for the safety strategy. And that's a super different role, compared to going and opening the hazardous chemical cabinets and seeing if the
Yeah,
label's on,
yeah.
just a total different role, right? But then you have to think to yourself, okay, if that's a role I'd like to have, then what do I still need to learn about? And maybe you need to learn about how to set goals and how to understand business context so that the goals that you and your team sets fits within the business context. Maybe you need to work out your style of communication so that you can refine a message. And so you're not going too deep into the weeds about all the things that are going on, but actually the way that you're communicating is a way that leadership teams and other colleagues can hear because it's what's important to them.
Right, right, right. I really like that communication piece at the end because we all know that if you go into the boardroom and you just came from the maintenance shop and you don't alter your behavior, you don't alter your language, because at times we want to alter that language to reach the people, but you're not going to find a one size fits all. You certainly don't want to go into any type of meeting and there's any form of cussing and raising your voice and those kinds of things because that certainly is not what a leader does. A leader is a leader because of things like influence, cool, calm head, all that kind of stuff. Then. And I really like your point on goals and metrics and all that kind of stuff then. So I know that I really suffer with that every year. Like, oh no, it's that time of year again. I really got to sit down and do this. And many times it's because I struggle getting on the schedule of the top guys. Like, look, let's link everything together. I can always come up with goals in a heartbeat, but that doesn't mean that it supports you. It just makes me look good, of course, So it's always hard to come up with a win-win for everybody out there.
100%. And one of the things I think about when I think about different types of health and safety roles is whether you've got the type of role where you're running a playbook. So,
Mm.
the information has been given to you, the goals have been set by someone else, and your job is to be an operator and an executor and to execute against that playbook. And you do it really, really well. But there's a different type of role. And again, this is the role that I'm seeing people aspire to, which is a more senior role in environment, health, and safety. But with that more senior role, you're actually writing the playbook yourself. And it takes a very different mind shift, and to your point about how do you have to communicate differently if you've come from the shop floor into a boardroom, there's a lot of switching in your brain. The way that you talk to a frontline employee about a hazard or a situation where you're needing to be very relatable and, very human, let's call it, versus when you get into the boardroom, it's there's a certain type of people there and they also have goals and things that they're trying to accomplish, which is just really different. So one of the things that I learnt about was how to switch between, the way you communicate and the way you think, depending on who you're talking to. So that might be a tip as well, to folks who are listening today, and especially as you're thinking about the next role for yourself, is that something that you want to do? Do you just really, really love being on the shop floor or, being in the trucks and talk, whatever it is, being
Mhm.
with the workers. And that's something that you really, really enjoy. And by the way, there's no judgment of that. There are amazing safety people who've been doing that for 30 years and they are the best, the
Mhm.
absolute best. But I would say if you want or if you have an aspiration to a different type of job or a bigger job as well, you're going to need to think through what that involves. And one of the things I suggest to people that they can do is start looking at different job descriptions and actually see like different levels of jobs or different types of jobs
Mhm.
and pull a few job descriptions for different companies or whatever and see what they're asking for. And it's even things like when they're describing the responsibilities or the expected outcomes of the roles. How big are they? And I often get people to focus on the verb. And this may sound a bit nerdy, but the point really is that when you're looking at different levels of jobs, the way you do it is commensurate with the level of the job. So
Oh,
for
yes.
example, yeah, so for example, it might say, support a team in performing induction or orientation training for safety. Let's just say something like that.
Mhm.
That obviously is a more junior role because it's a supporting verb. But when you get into the more senior roles, they might be saying something like develop a strategy or align with other stakeholders on topic A, B, and C. And the thing that we need to think about for ourselves is, have I done that before? And to what level have I done it before? And then how can I keep stretching myself? Like, let's say I'm not doing it right now, but how do I stretch myself and maybe ask my manager if I could lead a project to actually do that so that you can get to that next level?
That is a great point. I've never thought about looking at how other companies are listing this out. I've just kind of thought, well, companies kind of looking for the next step, and this is kind of what they are looking for the next step. That would really help folks to sit down and not get ready for the next step in their company, of course, but to sit down and say, so how do I go out and get these skills out there? So I have run into a couple of safety pros who do not want to do things like presentations. And I'm like, well, that's okay. That's awesome, of course. But that also means that depending upon the company, they may actually be expecting that. So it doesn't mean that you're going to have that limiting role, but at some point, you're probably going to have to get over that fear. Or if you're just scared, you just do it anyway, scared, of course. But just as long as people understand that, there's going to have to be there's going to have to be some growth, and most of the time, growth is super uncomfortable. But I've always found that it's great at the end as you're going through it. It's not always great, of course.
It's super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's super uncomfortable, but unless you put yourself in that position, you're not going to grow. And then I think the other thing that some people get into, and I'm guilty of this as well, is you do things like procrastinating. So, you're procrastinating by learning. So you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go and do this continuing education course, or
Mhm.
I'll go and watch this video, or I'll read this book. And then, you think that you're learning, but
Mhm.
actually, the way that you learn is by doing as well. And the only way you get better is by learning and getting that feedback and then pivoting and adjusting to what the feedback is. And so that would be the other thing that I'd encourage people to do is give something a try. And, I think about it in terms of experimentation, because if you experiment, then you're basically choosing a hypothesis and you're looking at data. And so if you can, it becomes less about yourself and it becomes more about the data. And so you try something and you know that, remember from school or wherever when you did experiments, that sometimes things failed and then you learnt from it and then you adjusted and then you went and did it again. And so that's the thing I encourage people to do a lot because honestly, what have you got to lose? You have very little to lose, maybe except if you feel embarrassed if it didn't go well. But again, you've got to get over that a little bit because the way to grow is by trying something and then learning from it. And don't get me wrong, and I was talking to someone about this the other day that depending on the company you work for, there may be different cultural contexts about experimentation and failure. So I've worked in companies before where experimentation was very much encouraged. And then I've worked in other companies and all of these amazing, amazing companies, but the culture was that whatever goals you set, you achieved them. And so
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I've worked at both. I've
Mhm.
worked at companies that you had goals that you knew you were going to hit. And then I've worked at other companies where I remember having a boss and he said to me, these goals are too easy. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I want to, I'm a high achiever. I want to achieve the goals. And this
Mhm.
person said to me, if you're not achieving at least 20% of your goals, it means you haven't set hard enough goals. And I had to sit with that for a really long time because it's like, okay, people say that it's okay to experiment and fail, but do they really mean it at the end of the day? And so by this person actually saying, no, no, I'm expecting you to set such tough goals that you don't even know how to get them, how to achieve them. And by the way, I'm expecting that you are not going to achieve some of them. What it actually did was stretched me even more to say, all right, let's go. Let's set something super difficult. And even if we achieve 80% of it, then it's probably more than the easy goal that we would have set. That would have been the home run.
Mhm. That is a awesome, awesome boss. There's some bosses that are super conservative and they want you to make sure that you're going to meet these goals, but that is a really good boss. Yeah, really
Yeah,
good.
I think they had a different risk tolerance to me. But
Mhm.
again, when you have a boss like that, and I'd love to know whether, anyone listening to our podcast here has had bosses like that. When you have a boss like that, it totally opens you up to new possibilities because it makes you feel more courageous as well. In a way, they're sort of giving you permission to fail.
Mhm.
Whereas a lot of bosses don't. They say they do, but then come the end of the year and you've got your performance review and you didn't hit the goal. It's like, okay, actually, was it real or not that I could experiment and that I could take a swing and have a miss? And that sort of, you see that often during the performance review, don't you?
Right, 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 right. That is really good that somebody was basically saying we want you to really work hard at something that you may not achieve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that is really good. Really good.
Yeah. It's so good. It's so
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Well, there's definitely times going back a little bit where you talked about like procrastinating and learning. There's definitely times that I said, "Oh, I should probably get a book on this topic. I'm gonna read this book. I'm going to get real good, read like a little, I'll experiment, I'll do this stuff then." And really what I was doing was just putting it off. I should have just dove right in and just done it. And of course, I think I would have been a whole lot farther in life as opposed to I was really afraid that I was going to fail. I was
Yeah.
really trying to find that game plan and really make sure that I got it down. So,
Yeah, yeah,
hmm
and we all do it. I'm in a season of procrastinating right now. My book manuscript was due on January 31st. What's the
hmm
date today? February 28th. I
uh-huh.
got an extension until March 3rd, which is Monday. But I'm finding everything outside of editing these last few chapters of my book as possible. And
Oh,
so we all do it. I think also sometimes maybe we like that little bit of extra pressure, you
mhm.
know? So sometimes we do procrastinate and avoid doing things out of a little bit of fear or
Mhm.
not knowing where to start or wondering if we're going to be able to achieve the result we hope for. But then sometimes as well, we sort of like that little bit of an edge and, doing things at the last minute. I just figure as long as you have self-awareness of how you operate and what you need to achieve what you're trying to achieve, then that's probably fine as well. Far be it from you and me to tell people, how they manage their time and so forth.
Right. I heard a really good talk a couple of years back, and of course, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but part of the talk was you have to eat a frog. So, are you going to eat a frog first thing in the morning, or are you going to eat a frog at the end of the day? But now you're thinking about it the whole day because nobody wants to eat that frog, but you know it has to go down at some point. So, do you just hurry up and get it done first thing? Do you put it off and wait to the end? It was really kind of interesting just to kind of think about how that we all operate differently.
Yeah.
So for me, I like to try to tackle the hard stuff as early as possible. I probably would put off eating that frog, of course, because I don't want to eat something bad as soon as possible. But that really kind of helped me to open up and think about like, yeah, there's definitely times where I was going to make a phone call and I thought, I should probably check my email. I should probably gather my thoughts some more. I should probably get a little more prepared. And what I was doing was just putting it off anyway.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And in a way, I wonder if that links to what we were talking about here about people's careers, right?
yeah.
Like
Mhm.
we're hearing plenty of people in safety saying they're not sure if they want to stay in safety and there's challenges with this profession and with the roles and sometimes you don't feel respected or it's just really difficult work.
Mhm.
And what I encourage people to do is you really need to put that time aside and figure out if this is the place for you, if this is the work for you, and to maybe eat that frog in the morning rather than the afternoon and actually just do it because no one, I think it's unusual for someone else to be building your career for you. We're
Right.
all fully formed adults. Most of us have agency over our choices. Sometimes not with everything, but a
Mhm.
lot we do. And so, even if we're in a difficult position or even if we're not, it's so worthwhile to actually think through what do I want out of this job and out of this career and what's the purpose? Why am I here?
Right.
Mm.
Right. So I work for a company. Of course, I'm not going to go over names and that kind of stuff, but they literally had a checklist and said, "All right, so you're a safety coordinator. If you want to be the safety specialist, the following things have to be done. Show us competence in the following areas." And for me, that was awesome because I really like to have a checklist. And I
Yeah,
could say, oh, I know I have to focus on these five things because I'm not doing these five things now, but I know I have to focus on these five things if I want that next step, you know. And that company was bought by another company and that whole system had gone away. But I was like, what a great system out there. It wasn't this um super super gray area like we want you to do better. Well, that's awesome, but that's not really something that you can sit down and measure. I'll just do better. So yeah, that checklist I thought was really nice. I liked it a lot.
yeah. Having frameworks for career progression is really helpful because it lets you see what the company's expectations are And it also lets you have a framework for a conversation with your manager where you can express or declare your aspirations. And, this is another thing that I often say to people as well, is if you are ambitious and you want to get a different role or a bigger role or, the next step up, sometimes you need to declare it, even if it's uncomfortable. So you might need to say, or you should say to your manager, my goal is to get promoted into this role, or my goal is to maybe not work in safety anymore. Maybe I want to go to operations or something else. And then wonderful leaders will help you chart out the way to get there. And then, of course, you take ownership yourself. But by declaring that aspiration, it also brings clarity to yourself because you can set timeframes around it. You can actually start working towards what it is,
Mhm.
and then it brings clarity to your manager as well.
Right,
Now, of
right.
course, you want to read the room. You want to, depending on who you work for and so forth, you still need to read the room and have context about whether that's going to work for you.
Mhm.
But I've always found it to, just being honest about it and taking that ownership.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I had used kind of that same thing once, and I had a boss who was a little bit of a joker. So I kind of said, "Hey, I really want to do the following things, and I didn't quite catch that whole reading the room thing. And he basically said, you just described that you want me to quit and you take my job from me. And I was like, well, I wasn't talking about forcing you out, but I, assume at some point when you go up, then I go up, too. So I found that to be really good that I could basically say, yes, I want your role. So hopefully I'm not taking it from you, of course, because companies have downsizing and that kind of stuff at times, you know.
Yeah.
But that was really nice because then he could say, oh, well, then let's focus on the following things that you're not doing now, too.
100%. And especially if you couch it in terms of skills and experiences, it's also showing that you're thinking about the contribution and the value that you're giving the company. One of the things that I've always loved are leaders that have fungible skills. So fungible skills meaning
Mm.
that you can move between different types of roles or even areas, but you have this broad skill set that allows you to dip in and out of different types of technical areas. So,
Mhm.
that's something as well that maybe safety people might want to think about. Yes, you can be amazing at doing risk assessments or all of the technical elements of the work that you do, but
Mhm.
what are the fungible skills that, say, in an economic climate, when a company is needing to think about their headcount or the roles that they keep, what are the skills that you have that makes you so valuable to the company that they're like, yeah, I really want to
Mhm.
keep that person because they can adjust and move around and still be an A player.
That is a fantastic thing. And that also sounds like maybe episode 3 in the next couple of weeks. We can sit down and talk about that. Megan, we are bumping up on time. Let folks know how they can find you, connect, get any coaching from you, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me over on LinkedIn. I'm myself wanting to add value to the profession by supporting people with different insights and information. So I'm Dr. Megan Tranter over on LinkedIn, or else you can find me over on my website, which is megantranter.com. And as I always say to people, I'm a person, I'm a human being, I'm answering the emails and answering the pings and messages. So, if you've got anything you want to ask me, just let me know.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And I really like your what would you call it? A newsletter, a article?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Each
really good.
Monday, yeah, on LinkedIn, each Monday, I'm publishing a newsletter article.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
very good. Very good. It's really good to sit down and read those. So thank you
thank
so
you.
much. And with that, let's wrap up episode 238 with Dr. Megan Tranter. Everyone, thank you and have a safe day.